So if you've ever worried about what your team is thinking about you, or worse yet, saying about you, well, I've got some good news, but I've also got some bad news for you. The bad is that it's quite possible that those kind of fears that you have around what they might be saying or thinking might not really be just in your head. And maybe, just maybe, you're not the manager you hoped you could be yet. But the good news is that you are not a lost cause. You're not a lost cause. You know, if you've been following me for some time, then I'm sure you've heard me say that I truly believe that you, my friend, were chosen for this role for a reason. And because I really do believe that, like I really believe that in my core, I'm here to show you how you can tap into your full potential as a people leader and make that kind of impact that I know you are so capable of. Now, the first step is to identify some of those core differences between the types of managers that really struggle to earn the respect of their team and build that trust versus the ones who are able to inspire their team and bring out the best in them and ultimately make an impact. And that's why in today's video, what I want to do is I want to reveal a couple of things. Number one, I want to talk about the differences between a mediocre manager versus a life-changing manager. And I have a feeling it's not what you're thinking. Number two, I want to talk about the mistakes that a lot of new managers make. Actually, if I'm being honest, even experienced managers make these mistakes that keeps them or holds them back from making an impact. And then third, I want to share just 3 really powerful shifts that you can use right away from this video to help you start making an impact in your role. Now, in case it wasn't obvious, I want to take a hot second to level with you on 2 really important things. Number one, if you stumbled across this video because you were looking for some sort of technical definition of the difference between leadership and management, well, I want you to know that that's not what I'm going to be talking about. Like, I'm not going to be digging into the technicality of what's on your job description, okay? Because while those things are important, they absolutely are, like what's on your job description is important, I want to talk about something that has far more substance than anything that is found on a piece of paper. I want to talk about character. And speaking of character, which is my second thing, if I know you, which I feel like I do, right? If you're anything like the students that I have the honor and privilege of working with on a weekly basis, then I already know that you're pretty hard on yourself and that you're probably already beating up on yourself for all the ways that you're not meeting your current expectations. And so if that's the case, I want to say a couple of really important things to you before we dive into the content, which is this. Number one, if you're feeling a lot of self-doubt right now, if you are just feeling like you're on shaky grounds, I want you to know that you're not alone in feeling that way. You know, when I was a new manager, there was this constant tape that was on in my head as well with regards to whether or not I was cut out for it or good enough for it. And so I want you to know that that's essentially not abnormal. A lot of those thoughts that you're having are very normal and you're not isolated in those feelings. And then I think the second thing that I think is important for you to know is that no matter where you are right now, no matter what it feels like if it feels like it's really hard and you can't come back from it, I want you to know that that's not completely true. You know, I'm reminded of one of my students, Nelisa, who just recently graduated from my NMA program, and she came into my program with a lot of those same doubts herself. And she left feeling so much more confident and having the results to back it up. And so I want you to know that no matter where you are, you can adjust. And then number 3, and I think this is probably the most important thing for you to know, you cannot grow if you are stuck in this loop of self-judgment, because it's impossible to hear anything that you need to hear. Like, it's not possible to hear the things that people are saying if you're consistently judging yourself for where you're not at yet. And so instead, what I want you to do is replace that self-judgment with 2 important C's, which is compassion and curiosity. And if you can do that for me, then I know that this video that we're gonna the content, I should say, that we're gonna go through today is gonna be so life-changing for you, and it's gonna really help you level up as a leader, okay? So now that we've gone there and we've had that little chat, now we can just dive right into the content. Let me ask you, as a kid, did you ever find yourself looking at a teacher that you couldn't stand and thinking to yourself, oh man, if I was a teacher or if I was in charge, I would be a cool teacher. I wouldn't act like this. And then years later, maybe you find yourself in the position where you are a lead, let's say of a project with a bunch of other students, and you realize to yourself, oh snap, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Well, I find the same thing applies with being in management. I think sometimes from the outside looking in, we feel like, oh, this looks easy. I know exactly what I'm going to do, because we feel like we have all the answers until we get into the seat and we're like, oh, this is a lot harder than I would have thought. Well, this brings me to the first mistake that I see a lot of new managers make that takes them straight into what I like to call Mediocreville. See if you can spot the problem. So the setting is this. You have an employee that has been showing up late to the last couple of team meetings, and so naturally you want to discuss it with them. So Mediocre Mindy would approach this or enter into this space with the employee by saying, Sophia, you've been late for these last couple of meetings, and that is unacceptable. As you can see, Mediocre Mindy's approach to having this conversation with her team member, Sophia, was laced with what? Assumptions, which led to this kind of tone of criticism versus life-changing Linda's approach. See if you can spot the difference. So Sophia, I wanted to talk to you because I've observed over the past couple of weeks you've been late to our team meetings, which just isn't like you. And so I wanted to take a moment and check in and see if there was anything going on that's preventing you from being able to make it in on time. You see, life-changing Linda versus mediocre Mindy tapped into something that I think is arguably one of the most important qualities that we can develop as a leader, which is humility. Instead of going in there assuming the worst and with an agenda, what she chose to do instead is enter into the space with humility, which led to curiosity. You know, something that I've observed about this beautiful quality of humility is that it surfaces other great qualities as well, one of which is curiosity. You see, when we are humble, we accept that we don't know everything, that we don't know it all, and that the story that we might be telling ourselves on any given topic or the assumptions that we might have around a situation might not be true. And so as a result, we come into a situation that could sometimes be tense from a place of just truly wanting to understand and truly wanting to come into alignment or figure out what the next steps are. And so as a result, the framing of that conversation is different, the tone and the delivery of that conversation is different, which yields much better and more productive results. And so, as I'm sure you have pretty much figured out right now, mediocre managers typically lack humility, which limits their ability to be curious. You know, I think one of the reasons why so many new managers just struggle with this quality of humility is because, one, I actually think that the way that society talks about humility makes it seem as though it's a weakness rather than a strength. And then secondly, I think it has to do with the fact that when you're a new manager, you're very sensitive to the fact that you are having to learn a lot of new things and that you don't know a whole lot of things, which puts you into this place, or which places you in this place where you're constantly triggered. And so as a result, you feel like you have to overcompensate for what you don't know, which leads to you then being a little bit more authoritative than you need to be for any given situation. It's a weird thing that happens. And so as challenging as it might be, I think that if you're able to just put aside some of the assumptions that you're coming to the table with, you'll already be adopting one of the most crucial characteristics of a life-changing leader. But of course, trying to be humble can come across very inauthentic if you're simply using it as a tactic to get things done, which is what brings me to the second thing that I believe separates a mediocre manager from a life-changing leader. So I don't know about you, but I have heard all sorts of things from team members as to why they were coming in late. I've heard things like, my dog ate my whole charger, to, oh snap, I thought today was Sunday instead of Thursday, and so that's why I didn't come in on time. Or this one was my favorite. I sat next to a rat on the subway. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? But I digress. You'll actually have to let me know in the comment section below if like the craziest excuse you've heard. I'm curious to see what it shows up as. Anyways, let's get back to that example that I referenced earlier, where Sophia was confronted about the fact that she was late. So let's say, you know, after this like question is opened up in terms of like, why are you late? Sophia's response is this. Oh man, you know, you are so right. I have been coming into some of our meetings a little bit late. The reason is just because I'm not getting an opportunity to eat my breakfast at home. And so when I come into work in the morning, I'm just taking a couple of minutes to warm up my food so that I can eat something, because I don't want to be cranky in the meeting. And I think what's happening is I'm just losing track of time. And so That's why I've been late, but I figure it's better for me to be clear than cranky, right? So I figured you'd be okay with that. Now, I know what you're thinking. That is the dumbest excuse ever. Yet at the same time, I'm sure if you were to think back, I'm sure you've heard some sort of rendition of that excuse before in your past as well. And so let's say now that's the response for Sophia. How would mediocre Mindy respond? Well, most likely it would sound something like this. Okay, well, there's a lot wrong with what I just heard there. In fact, what I'm hearing is that you think that your breakfast is more important than our time. Yeah, like I said earlier, it is not acceptable for you to be late. My expectation is that you are on time for every single meeting, and in fact, that you are on time for work. And that is what I want to see moving forward. Now, factually, it's not like mediocre Mindy isn't saying something that isn't true. I mean, effectively, Sophia is choosing to be late, and her excuse is pretty ridiculous. And we've all been in that situation, right? Where someone is offering us up an excuse that is ridiculous and also in a way that they're not accepting full responsibility or ownership of their actions, and also they just lack situational awareness, right? All of that combined can be pretty frustrating and upsetting, to be quite honest. So the question is, how would life-changing Linda respond in a situation like this where she's also given a nonsensical excuse and where her emotions might stir her up to be upset? How would she respond? Okay, so thank you so much for your honesty as well as for your reasoning. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding where you're coming from. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that because you want to give your very best to our team meetings, you're taking that extra little bit of time to grab something to eat, and as a result, it's crossing over into our meeting times. Is that correct? Am I understanding you accurately? So in this situation, right, life-changing Linda was given the exact same excuse and probably could have gotten upset, right? Rightly so, because it was an upsetting situation. But instead of firing back an emotionally charged response, what she decided to do is just hear Sophia out, hear out what she had to say, which allowed her to pull the attention of what Sophia was trying to communicate, and then of course restate it for clarity's sake, right? She wanted to make sure that she understood her properly before restating or before bringing up what the expectations are. She just wanted to make sure that she understood where Sophia was coming from. Now, this is a far more productive way of having any conversation. And the reason why someone can do something like that, which is hear someone out in kind of like a tenuous, frictiony type of situation, is because of emotional intelligence, which is the other characteristic that I believe is so vital for us as leaders. You see, emotional intelligence, because of the fact that it's so big and really encompasses so many different competencies, it is helpful in every area that has to do with dealing with people, right? In this situation, it manifested itself in the ability to manage emotions, but emotional intelligence is all about also building relationships and meeting people where they are depending on what their personality style is and everything. Like, emotional intelligence is just huge, but it can definitely help us when it comes to leadership, because leadership is about people, and understanding people requires us to have emotional intelligence. So it just works. Now, emotional intelligence is very important, but there is another quality that is also important in leadership. Go back to Mindy, who basically just said, listen, Sophia, your excuse isn't cutting it. It's unacceptable, and here are my expectations moving forward. Which, by the way, the frame of that is correct. The framing of that conversation was correct. It's just that the content of that conversation wasn't quite on point, right? So if we're not going to do it like mediocre Mindy, how would we do it? What should it sound like? Well, let's tap in or peer into what life-changing Linda would have said. So most likely she would have said something like this. All right, so thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that I understood your perspective. So I think what's necessary at this point is that we take a gigantic step back, because what I'd like to do is just walk you through what my expectations are as it relates to being on time, what it means here on our team, as well as why it's important that as a team, we are on time for all of our interactions. You see the difference? I mean, while they're both, yes, of course, saying pretty much the same thing in essence, one person is clearly communicating with Sophia. right? One person is framing out the discussion in a way that it is clear at the very beginning what the agenda is or where they will be going in the discussion, which will ultimately lead to a successful outcome. Listen, whether you're an introvert or a people pleaser, or maybe someone that has never really honed this skill set of clear communication, I want you to know that I recognize that it can be very scary, right? And there's no judgment here, because the truth of the matter is communication in general is just not taught. And then clear communication, which has so many different facets, it can be scary in the beginning. I mean, honestly, it's a huge reason why so many people join my New Manager Accelerator program, because they want to improve and deepen their knowledge in this skill set of clear communication. But I want you to know that it's not like you're a lost cause because you recognize or as we're going through this, you realize, hey, communication is not my thing, because it's not a lot of people's thing, because it's just not taught. But the key is that you prioritize it. Like if you recognize that this is a thing that you're struggling with, that you prioritize it and you start working at it, because it is so crucial and vital to effective people management, because it's all about communication. So to paint a picture, I want to zoom out and discuss what the traits of a mediocre manager looks like. So first things first, a mediocre manager exists in the status quo, meaning they are comfortable with the way things are. And so as a result, they don't try to do better, be better, or create better, because they are comfortable with the way things are. They view people as resources and they treat them accordingly. And yeah, there are some of them that will do some research, but the intention of it is not with this desire to do better. It's because they're looking for a quick hack. They're looking for a tip or a trick or a tactic just to get through to the next, without really like pausing to figure out what is causing their symptoms and dealing with that. They don't go deep, not really. A life-changing leader, on the other hand, well, you're driven by this deep desire to create better than what is around you. You treat people with dignity and respect. And you don't want to just do a good job. You want to feel good about the work that you're doing at the end of the day. And of course, you're committed to learning and developing yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that why you're here watching this video? You want to stretch, you want to grow, you just want to be better, is what I know about you. You know, at the end of the day, what I know to be true is this: a life-changing leader is defined by their character. And they choose to step into this role of leadership knowing that it's not the easiest path. It never is. But yet they choose it over and over again because it's worth it. And as a result, it becomes this kind of lifelong commitment that you're in. But again, it's because it's worth it. You know, anyone can make you a manager, but only you, my friend, can make yourself a leader. So I guess now it's time to ask yourself, which one are you? So here's the thing though, I know that it's not easy to keep showing up over and over again when you feel like it's hopeless, or when you are dealing with a team that is literally displaying some toxic behaviors. And so if that's the case for you, I want you to check out this video right here.